The movie starts with a man named Mike running from a hooded man in the city streets at night. The hooded man corners Mike at one point and tells him that he is showing Mike the path. He again tells Mike to let her go. Mike fails to understand when suddenly the guy shoots him in the head. It turns out Mike was having a dream and he wakes up immediately. As he wakes up, he hears whispering noises, but they soon stop. His wife, Angie, wakes up and asks him what is wrong. Mike tells her that he had a dream which felt very real. When Angie asks about the dream, he rejects analyzing and sharing his dreams with her, as he is not into that stuff. His wife tells him that it is her belief, and he doesn't need to believe in it. His wife then tells him to get back to sleep, as it is a mere dream. Mike tells her that his heart is beating abnormally fast. His wife suggests that he drink some water and lie down. Mike gets up and drinks some water. When he feels a chill in his arms and asks his wife if she turned down the temperature, his wife denies the accusation. Mike, while lying down in his bed, sees his daughter Sophie standing at the foot of their bed. When he calls Sophie, his wife looks at the end of the bed, but finds no one there. Mike clearly sees her and keeps calling Sophie. Suddenly, Sophie walks backwards and vanishes into the walls. Mike gets scared and turns on the light, but finds there is no one in the room. At the same time, Sophie calls her father from next door. Mike goes to his daughter and asks her what happened. Sophie lets her father know that she cannot move in her sleep. Mike tells her that it is a disease called sleep paralysis. It is a condition which appears when the blood sugar drops. Mike gives her a sugar cube to increase her blood sugar and checks her body temperature to see that she has a burning fever. Mike calls on his wife and tells her to bring medicine for a fever. As Angie looks for medicine, Mike notices that Sophie is unconscious. He waits no longer and gets her in the car before driving her to the hospital. In the car, Angie asks Mike about the incident in the bedroom, thinking it was Sophie's spirit trying to say her last goodbye. Mike comforts his wife by pointing out that this isn't like the dream Angie had about her late father. The couple reach the hospital and look for a doctor to treat Sophie. As they find the doctor that treated Sophie previously, Mike reasons that even though Sophie consumes 3 meals a day, she may still be malnourished. The doctor tells Mike to calm down and let him see her. As he attends her with a stethoscope, he finds strange marks on her back. When he asks Sophie about the marks, Sophie seems to have no idea either. The doctor calls Mike and Angie to ask about the marks on her back. The marks shock the couple, and they also inquire whether Sophie fell down or if something happened to her. The doctor is suspicious of the couple for child abuse and asks Sophie to tell him everything so that he can help. Sophie replies to the doctor that no one can help her. Later, Dr. Thomas tells Mike that he still doesn't know what is causing the malnutrition in Sophie, and he also can't figure out where the marks came from. He also adds that her symptoms say she has malnutrition, but her body does not look malnourished. He asks for some more time to run some tests at different times of the day to find clues about her disease. Later that night, Mike and Angie are sleeping beside Sophie's hospital bed. As Sophie makes some noises in her sleep, Mike wakes up and tucks her in. All of a sudden, Mike hears a thumping sound, as if a giant is walking outside the hospital room. As Mike approaches the door, he also hears growling noises and a heavy breathing sound. He puts his ear to the door to check, but finds no sound. He opens the door, but finds no one in the hallway. The next morning, Dr. Thomas discusses Sophie's condition with the nurse in charge. He looked at Sophie's clinical file and found that she has the same symptoms as Carl Matthew. The nurse reminds the doctor that Carl was best friends with Sophie. The nurse assumes that it could be a virus which was passed to Sophie. The doctor also thinks that could be a possibility and tells the nurse to call social services and make sure she is eating her food correctly. The nurse visits Sophie with her morning breakfast and sees Mike alone in the room. Mike wakes up from a nap and informs her that Sophie and her mother are in the washroom. The nurse then speaks to Mike about the similarities between Sophie's case and Carl Matthew's case. Mike becomes quite surprised that even the marks on Sophie's back are similar. Mike tells the nurse that Carl is gone. He questions the nurse about what Dr. Thomas is doing differently this time to save his daughter. The nurse tells him to ask the question to Dr. Thomas personally. Angie and Sophie return to the hospital bed. Sophie expresses that she doesn't want to eat. Mike presses her that eating is the only way she can feel better and says that he needs to work. On his way to the car, he calls Carl's mother. She picks up the phone and talks to him very normally, until Mike mentions Carl's passing and its cause. She says doesn't want to talk about it, but Mike interrupts her and says Sophie is sick too. Carl's mother gets scared and says she has to go. But before she hangs up the phone, Mike hears her say that he can't save his daughter. In the next scene, Sophie is drawing a picture of her family when a lady named Karen shows up from social services and wants to talk to Angie. The lady asks some general questions about Sophie's health. Karen then asks Angie if it is alright to talk to her privately. Angie looks a bit dumbfounded, but says it's fine. In the next scene, Mike is in his office, talking to his boss, who tells him that he should stop taking vacation days or he will be fired. Mike becomes quite angry given his situation and storms out. While Mike is working, his co-worker, named Ron, comes up to him and asks him if he is okay. He says Mike looks worried. Mike tells him about Sophie's disease, and Angie calls him in the meantime. She tells Mike that the doctors have informed her that the weakness is created only at night, when she has nightmares. Angie also tells Mike that she is taking Sophia home, as per doctor's instructions. Mike hangs up the phone, but looks very tired. Mike informs a concerned Ron that he is having a hard time sleeping recently because of recurring nightmares. He also tells Ron that he sees someone shooting at him. Ron suggests Mike see Hope, Ron's girlfriend, who is an expert on dreams. Mike refuses, saying once again that he doesn't believe in that kind of stuff. Ron, though, insists that not everything has an explanation. Later, Mike visits Carl's mother. Carl's mother refuses to talk at first, and keeps saying no doctor knows the problem. Later, Carl's mother adds that Carl's father thought Carl's dreams were the key. She also explains that whenever Carl's father was with his son at night, he would be okay. Mike asks Carl's mother how he knew about the dreams. Carl's mother replied that they fought a lot about this, as her husband wouldn't tell her. One night, he agreed to tell her, but that night, he had a heart attack. After his passing, Carl became vulnerable again. 3 days after her husband's demise, Carl also passed away. Mike shows his condolences to Carl's mother, and asks her one last question about the call he made earlier, why she claimed he couldn't rescue his kid when she hung up. Carl's mother becomes shocked, and brings over a piece of paper with a drawing that says, "You can't save her." She adds that at first she thought it was Carl's drawing, but she believes now that it was drawn by her husband because of the good handwriting. The same night, Angie puts Sophie to bed and tells her that she can trust her. Then Angie asks her daughter if there is anything she wants to tell her about the marks on her back. Sophie replies that she doesn't know anything. Angie confirms to Sophie that she and Mike are there when she needs them, and not to get scared of anything. Angie walks out of Sophie's room, when all of a sudden, a nearby door opens by itself. Angie thinks it's Mike and calls out his name. Following the sounds, when she reaches the next room, another door opens by itself, and she becomes scared. The same thing repeats itself when she enters the next room. As she turns on the lights, she finds no one. Mike enters the house and calls on Angie. Angie seems a little disturbed, so he asks if she is okay. Angie replies that she is fine, and informs Mike that Sophie is asleep. Mike and Angie then sit beside Sophie's bed and talk about when Sophie was born. Apparently, they had another child which passed away. Angie says she thought Mike would leave her when their first child lost its life. Mike swears he would never do such a thing. In the following scene, Mike sits at his work table and researches Ron's girlfriend, Hope. He researches how to remember his dreams, when suddenly he hears a growling noise. When he pauses the video, he hears a whispering noise, then Angie calls him, which scares him. That same night, Mike is asleep when something pulls his leg, and he wakes up, startled. As he wakes up, he turns on his mobile flashlight and looks around, trying to figure out who, or what, pulled his leg. He even searches under the bed and finds nothing. He gets out of the room, when all of a sudden, the door is slammed shut behind him. When he tries to open the door, it doesn't open. All of a sudden, he hears banging on the front door of the house. As he opens it, he finds nothing outside. He turns around to look for any threats, and the door behind him slams once again. Mike then tries to turn on the lights, but finds that there is no electricity in the house. Mike heads to the basement, and right before fixing the electricity panel, he hears whispers around him. All of a sudden his phone's torchlight runs out, and he can hear growling. As it comes closer and closer, he fixes the electricity panel, but he's alone in the room. The next morning, Mike seems to be in a jolly mood. When Angie asks him if he can remember his dream from the previous night, he denies having any dreams at all. Angie then notices a strange mark on his neck and asks him about it. Mike, not knowing what she is talking about, faces the mirror and finds a mark around his neck. He says he didn't have it before last night. After saying goodbye to Sophie and Angie, Mike leaves for work. Angie and Sophie decide to play guessing draws. Angie blindfolds Sophie and draws a rabbit with Sophie's hand. She guesses it correctly. When Sophie wants to play again, Angie agrees and blindfolds her. As she blindfolds her, she receives a call, and an ominous hand takes Sophie's hand to draw a picture that says, "You can't save her." The ghost imitates Angie's voice and gives clues that the drawing is about a family member. Sophie guesses correctly by saying it's Mike. Angie gets scared and asks Sophie who drew it. Sophie answers that it was Angie. Suddenly, a photo frame drops in the hallway. Angie goes to pick it up and finds the same words written on the back of the photo frame. The photo is of Mike and Sophie. In the next scene, Mike is at the office planning to buy a CCTV camera when Ron enters the room and asks him if he is doing all right. Mike tells him there is something going on in his house. Ron suggests once again that Mike talks to Hope. Mike rejects his offer though, determined to figure it out without help, and returns home with security cameras. As Mike sets up the cameras, Angie hears a vase breaking in the dining room. As she goes to look for it, the room is empty, so she believes Sophie did it. As she bends down to pick up the broken pieces of the vase, she sees a horrifying apparition of the monster. She screams and runs away to hide in the kitchen. Mike rushes to the kitchen and finds Angie cowering with fear. Angie tells Mike that she saw a monster-like thing in the dining room. Mike checks the dining room but finds nothing. Sophie, on the other hand, is drawing in her room when suddenly one of her crayons falls from the table. The window slowly opens by itself. As Sophie reaches down to pick it up, her drawing starts to fly and gets stuck in the window corner. As Sophie tries to reach it, she almost falls down from the window and starts screaming for help. Mike rushes to her room and her door slams by itself. Mike tries to open the door but can't. At last he breaks the door open and saves Sophie at the last moment. After saving Sophie, Mike and Angie are horrified when someone rings the doorbell. Mike gets the door and sees Karen from social services. Mike hesitates to let her in, but Angie insists. Karen wants to talk to Sophie alone. Angie lets her do her job. Mike hesitates, but Angie pulls him into their room and convinces him that these are just protocols. If they stop Karen, they might forcefully take Sophie. Karen asks Sophie if her dad is trying to harm her in any way, to which Sophie says her father loves her and always shows up to save her when she has the bad dreams. As Mike and Angie are talking upstairs, Angie notices writing on the wall saying the same exact words from the previous drawings. Mike rushes back to Sophie when Karen asks what is wrong. Mike tells Karen to leave when she shows Mike a drawing with the exact same words. Mike informs Karen that Sophie can't read or write yet. When Karen asks Sophie, she refuses the accusation. Mike and Sophie start playing in the backyard while Angie erases the writing on the wall. As Angie is washing the drawings, the door moves by itself. She finds the window is open and thinks that the wind must be the reason behind the scary movement of the door. She closes the window, but the door slams by itself again. She tries to open the door, but the door seems to be locked. She keeps trying when Mike opens the door from the other side. Mike tells Angie that everything will slowly become normal and advises her to not make things weird. Sophie, meanwhile, sits in the bathtub when suddenly an unseen force pulls her into the water. Mike enters the bathroom and saves her. Sophie tells Mike that she was stuck in the bathtub and couldn't move. Mike hugs Sophie tightly and tells her it'll be okay. Later, Mike is having a dream again, where he is running in the city streets and escaping from the hooded gunman. The gunman corners him again, and this time he reveals his face. The man is none other than Mike's dad. Mike's father tells him that he is showing him the only path, and tells him that he can't save his daughter. When Mike questions him about such claims, Mike's father shoots him in the face. Mike wakes up, startled. He gets scared when he looks at the bed and finds his body still sleeping. His soul came out of his body. When he tries to leave the room, he hears something approaching and hides behind the door. After the monster leaves, he slowly goes to Sophie's room and witnesses the monster feeding off Sophie's energy. Mike tries to stop the monster, but the monster slaps him away. When he gets up and attacks the monster holds Mike by the throat and throws him downstairs. The monster then chokes Mike. When suddenly Angie wakes Mike up. Mike rushes to Sophie's room, and seeing she is all right, he hugs her. Angie asks what happened, to which Sophie replies that Mike saved her from the darkness. Since he was just resting, Angie wonders how he could have saved Sophie. Sophie claims that his soul saved her. The next morning, Mike tells Angie that he wants to know if it only happens at night. Angie adds that they have experienced weird encounters in the daytime as well. As they talk, the doorbell rings. Angie wonders who could it be, when Mike says it is Ron and his girlfriend. Angie doesn't want Sophie to listen to all the crazy talk about spirits, so she takes her upstairs. Mike tells everything about his dreams to Hope and says that his father shoots him in the face after saying that he can't save his daughter. Hope explains that his soul leaves his body and goes to the astral plane, where spirits exist. One can experience things that they don't in a normal plane. Hope talks about his dreams being a kick to push him to the astral plane. Mike says that he sees a demon in the astral plane. Hope looks in her book and says that each evil spirit is categorized according to their behavior. As she shows Mike evil spirits one by one, Mike recognizes the monster. Hope tells Mike that the last time this demon possessed a human body, it went on a murder spree. The town people arrested him, and before hanging him, a shaman sealed the demon in the astral plane so he couldn't possess any other humans. Mike plans to get back to the astral plane and fight it to save his daughter. Hope says that she knows a powerful spell that creates a protective shield, which could keep the demon away from her. Ron suggests an idea about capturing the monster in a body and sending him to jail, but nobody wants to sacrifice their body. Mike then convinces Angie to do the spell, saying it is the only option they have. Angie doesn't want to believe it at first, but after Mike shows her the drawing of the monster, she agrees to proceed with Mike and Hope's plan. Hope gets a long rope around the bed and puts her spell on it. Later that night, Mike checks the security cameras when the front door of the house opens by itself. Mike warns everyone that the demon has stepped into the house. When the demon enters the room, Mike can feel the cold. Hope confirms that the demon is in the room. Sophie is on the side of the barrier, so the demon tries to eat her soul through the barrier, and Hope tells Angie to put her in the middle. The demon turns the bed upside down, scattering everybody. Ron gets out of the circle by mistake, resulting in the demon choking him and siphoning his life energy. Ron immediately drops with marks all over his face. Angie, Sophie, and Hope run for their lives. Mike tries to stop the demon when it attacks Mike and knocks him unconscious. Angie and Sophie run towards the study and hide when the demon writes a message on the laptop saying, "You can't save her." Angie and Sophie start running to the storeroom and hide there. As they keep hiding, Sophie tells Angie that he is there in the room. Angie slowly looks back to find only Mike's coat hanging on the wall. Sophie insists that the demon is with them, and as Angie looks back, she sees the demon chasing them. Angie and Sophie run for their lives. Hope, on the other hand, is searching for salt in the kitchen. When she sees Angie and Sophie running, she asks them where the salt is. Angie, not paying any attention to her, warns her to run. Hope opens the kitchen cupboard to look for salt, when all the cupboards start slamming with a mysterious force. Suddenly, the blender starts by itself. Hope cuts off the line, but it still runs. She then throws the blender away and roams around the kitchen. She faces a mirror at one point and sees the demon behind her. She quickly goes back to the cupboard and finally finds the salt. She makes a circle with the salt and stays in it. Angie and Sophie run upstairs to Mike. Mike regains consciousness and notices that the electricity has been cut. He tells Angie and Sophie to wait while he goes to the basement to fix the power supply. Angie disagrees with Mike's idea, saying it's too dangerous. Mike says he wants the demon to focus on him. Mike walks to the basement entrance with Angie and Sophie. He tries to open the door, but it's locked. But after some time, the door opens by itself. When Mike stands in the entrance, he looks behind him and finds the demon. The demon pushes Mike down the stairs and grabs Sophie. But the demon lets Sophie go and follows Mike inside the basement, showing that it wants Mike only. As Angie tries to follow Mike, Sophie insists on not going. Angie then explains to Sophie that Mike would never leave them alone, and they should not leave him either. As they follow him down into the basement, Angie finds Mike lying injured on the floor. Angie wants to call the police and take him to the hospital. Mike insists Angie bring a rope or something to tie him up. Angie runs for the storeroom and returns with duct tape, only to see the demon trying to siphon Sophie's life energy. Angie tries to stop the demon, but the demon pushes her away. Mike then offers the demon to take his body, warning Angie to tie him up. Angie tries, but the demon, now inside Mike's body, frees himself. Angie runs upstairs, hides Sophie in the closet, and calls the police from under the bed. The demon wakes up in Mike's body and looks for Angie and Sophie. As he is leaving, Sophie makes a noise in the cupboard, and the demon grabs her. Angie, hiding in the other corner of the room, jumps on the demon when it throws her on the bed and starts to choke her. Hope comes running in and hits Mike with a baseball bat. Hope takes Angie and Sophie and starts to flee the house. The cops are already outside the house and are about to investigate the call they received when suddenly the girls come rushing out of the house. Mike is chasing them. The police shoot Mike and arrest him. At the end scene, Mike is given a life sentence and is taken care of at a mental evaluation center. Angie visits the center and meets with the doctor, who tells Angie that Mike's mind is still undamaged, but there is something wrong with his body. Angie looks at Mike through the cell bars. Mike looks back at his wife and winks at her, showing her that his mind is still there and he is keeping the demon in check.